Hi everyone! So it is officially day 3 of me being iced in my house, and I am honestly starting to go a tad bit stir crazy. The weather has got me feeling a tad bit down, and I don't know about you guys, but when I feel down, looking at pretty plants helps to cheer me up. So that's what we're going to be doing today. And more specifically, we are going to be taking a look at some anthuriums, because after getting my first anthurium recently, my silver blush anthurium, I did go down a bit of a rabbit hole, like looking into all the other various types of anthuriums out there and kind of dreaming about which other ones I might want to own someday. So we are going to be looking at my current top 20 favorite anthuriums. But before I forget, I'm going to shift this way slightly so that I have room to flash the plants up on screen for you over here. Okay, first off, you guys, I want to let you know that these are not going to be like in order of my least favorite to favorite or vice versa. I actually have grouped these plants together in a very specific way today, and that will become clearer to you as we go along. But the first plant I want to take a look at is actually the one anthurium that I have put on my 2023 wish list. Just as a refresher for you guys, or if you're new here and haven't seen that video, this is what is known as the Anthurium Doc Block F2. And I actually realized that I did not mention it in my wishlist video, you guys, that Doc Block is actually like a company name. I believe the website is Anthuriums by Doc Block if you want to go check it out, but that's why the name is Doc Block, and then F2 has to do with the generation of this particular hybrid, because this is a hybrid. And reminder that a lot of anthuriums are hybrids. Where possible, I will let you know what they are hybrids of today, but some of the plants out there and the ones that are on my list, a lot of people don't know what the hybrid is, or somebody didn't care to share, or whatever it may be. But where I have the info, I will give that to you today. But I love the way this plant looks. I love its big, velvety, very round, heart-shaped leaves. As you can see, it can get quite large. The new leaves do come in a reddish color, and then they kind of darken off into this deeper green, and then there's this beautiful contrast of this lovely silver veining on these leaves, and I think it is just absolutely gorgeous. Now, like I said, this is a hybrid, and it is a hybrid between an Anthurium Regale, I believe, and an Anthurium Crystallinum Red. And Crystallinum Red is actually the next plant I want to look at on this list. So this plant is actually believed to potentially be a hybrid between a regular crystallinum, a Dressleri, I think is how it's pronounced, and a Magnificum. And this, once again, is a beautiful plant. It does have a lot of similarities to the plant that we just looked at because it is one of the parent plants for that plant. But once again, the leaves come in this gorgeous red color. They are very velvety leaves, and then they harden off into that deeper green. And we still get that beautiful contrast with that veination on this plant as well. I feel like these leaves are a little bit smaller and less round, a slightly more elongated leaf, but still a beautiful, beautiful plant. Now, another thing you guys might not be aware of when it comes to the genus Anthurium is that there are multiple sections of plants within that genus. So these first two plants that we've looked at so far are in the section that is called, and hopefully I pronounce all these scientific names correctly for today for you guys. I'm going to do my best. I believe it is called Carlablackiae. I will flash it on screen for you just so that you can see what it looks like, because like I said, I'm trying my best, but I don't know if I'm actually pronouncing it right. But these plants are both in that section, and the next quite a few plants actually we're going to be looking at are going to be in that section as well. So that's why a lot of this first group of plants that you're seeing are going to have a lot of similarities to them. But since we were just talking about a crystallinum, let's talk about another crystallinum. And this is actually what is known as Selby's silver. And this is thought to be a sport variant off of a regular crystallinum. So this is just a crystallinum that developed a different shape basically to the leaves. It actually produces slightly smaller leaves than a regular crystallinum as well, but as you can see, they're also quite elongated. I will flash up a picture of a regular crystallinum just so you guys have it for comparison purposes. But once again, I think this is an adorable plant, and I love the silver veining. This plant actually has kind of more pronounced silver veining than the regular crystallinum as well. It's almost getting borderline towards like the silver blush that I own, and we will be taking a look at that here in a bit. But still a beautiful velvety leafed anthurium, once again, still in that same section as the previous plants that we've looked at. But speaking of more elongated leaves, this next anthurium is the longest, narrowest leafed anthurium on my list today, and it is probably not the one that you're all thinking it's going to be, because that one is not on my list actually. It's not on my list. We might talk about that a bit more here in a bit. But this anthurium is what is known as the Anthurium Villenaorum, I believe is how it is pronounced. And as you can see, a much more elongated, slightly narrower leaf. And the veining and the look of this leaf kind of reminds me of another plant that I really do like. I don't know why I don't have it on my wish list, but now that I'm thinking about it, and I can't remember what it's called. At one point it was classified, I think, as a caladium, but it's not anymore. It's something that starts with an X. I'll find it and flash it up on screen for you, a picture of the plant and the name of the plant. But hopefully you can see where I kind of feel like it's giving me kind of that same kind of vibe as that plant, but still a beautiful plant with those super velvety leaves in that kind of deeper green color. Definitely not as dark as some of the leaves that we're going to be seeing on some of the Anthurium on this list today, but once again has that beautiful pronounced veining. It is more of a white color versus a silver color like we've seen on some of the previous plants, but still a beautiful, beautiful Anthurium that I would love to own one day. But the next two plants we're going to be taking a look at, you guys, they are still in the same section of the Anthurium genus as the previous plants that we've looked at so far, but these two plants to me have veining on them that kind of give like a greenish glow. So we've seen the veining on the previous plants that had the silver veining, we've seen the white veining, and I don't know, maybe it's just me. Let's just take a look at the first one. This is Anthurium Regale or Regale, or I don't know how, you know, it's kind of like Gala. I'm sure there are many ways to pronounce this, but I think it's Regale. And as you can see, a very large Anthurium. These leaves can get very, very big, and the name does it justice because it looks like a very regal plant, at least in my opinion. But as you can see, we have these dark green, once again, kind of velvety leaves, and then that veining to me has like a slight greenish glow to it. Is it just me? Does anybody else like feel this way? Comment down below and let me know. But I think it has a greenish glow to it. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. I love how there is more veining on these leaves than on some of the previous plants we've looked at. It's kind of tighter together. It's in like a slightly different pattern than what we've seen on the previous ones. And it just is a beautiful, beautiful plant. Now this next plant is also a very large leafed Anthurium, and it also has that slight greenish glow to those veins, although the veins on this one are nowhere like near as pronounced as they are on that Regale that we just looked at. And this is what is known as the Anthurium Magnificum Verde. Now, I don't know why it is called Verde, but from everything I could find, it seems that the difference between the regular Magnificum and the Magnificum Verde is just that the leaves are slightly darker. So I guess you could say this is a like darker form of the Magnificum, but a gorgeous plant. I mean, look at that leaf. Look how big that leaf is and how velvety, and like that veining, as you see, has that slight greenish glow, but is much thinner. It is less defined. It makes this plant look a lot more like delicate to me. It's a lot kind of cleaner for those of you who don't like a lot of contrast on your plants, who like more of that kind of dedicated green. This is a perfect plant if you are that type of person, assuming you have room to house a plant that gets leaves that are this huge. Now, another thing I really like about this plant, we're going to see a lot more of this and even more defined on some of the plants we're going to be looking at further down the list. But this plant has the start of what I like to call ears. So it is a lobed leaf. There is a very deep sinus in the middle of the top of that leaf that creates those two separate lobes. I like to call them ears because the bigger they are, the more I feel like it starts to look like mouse ears. And once again, you will understand more when we get to some of the other plants further down the list. But I think it is a very beautiful distinguishing characteristic of this plant as well that we have not really seen on the previous plants we've looked at so far. But this plant is, once again, still in that same section of the Anthurium genus as all the plants we've been looking at thus far, as is our next one. And this is the next and final plant that has that kind of greenish glow to it, at least in my opinion. And this is what is known as Anthurium Besseae Aff. And once again, a very velvety leafed Anthurium. We have more of a heart shape to this leaf compared to the last plants that we had looked at, where I feel like the leaves were slightly longer. These leaves are a tad bit smaller as well, but as you can see, once again, it has that defined veining that has that slight greenish glow going on. And it also has that deeper sinus in the top that is creating those very defined lobes. But let's move on to some darker leafed varieties of Anthuriums. And honestly, I have been digging so much on dark leafed Anthuriums. Like, that was a whole separate sub rabbit hole that I went down when I went down my Anthurium rabbit hole a few weeks ago. But this first one I want to look at has a lot of similar characteristics to some of the ones that we've already looked at. but it definitely has darker leaves. So this is what is known as the Anthurium Carlablackiae. And as you can see, super dark leaf. We have that still slightly heart-shaped leaf, but it is a little bit more elongated than some of the ones that we have looked at. You still have that defined veining on there, but those leaves come in this like almost blackish burgundy-ish color before they harden off to a almost like borderline blackish greenish color, and once again a very velvety leafed anthurium, and I think this is absolutely gorgeous. However, then I saw the next plant, and this is what is known as a dark phoenix. Now a lot of the plants we've been looking at thus far do have leaves that come in the color of red. This plant does not. Now the leaves on this plant get super dark, similar to the one we just looked at. I feel like this one actually gets a little bit even darker than that, like going real close to black. Still a velvety leafed anthurium. Obviously you can see here though, one of the biggest differences on this plant is that it does not have that defined veining. So once again, if you like solid colored plants without a lot of contrast, this is definitely a perfect one for you. This one also produces new leaves that are green. They actually come in a lighter shade of green and then darken into this color. So there's no reddish involved with this plant at all. Once again, these are all still in that same section of the Anthurium genus that we've been talking about, but we have, let's see, we have one more plant that is in that section, and then we are going to move on to plants that are in a different section of the Anthurium genus. But the next one I want to talk about is still a dark-leafed Anthurium, and that is the Ace of Spades. So this to me is almost kind of like a cross between the Carlablackiae that we just looked at and the dark phoenix. So the veining on this is a little bit more pronounced than on the dark phoenix, but it's still not as pronounced as on that Carlablackiae. And I still think this is just a gorgeous plant though. However, similar to that Carlablackiae, the leaves do come in this deep kind of reddish color before hardening off and later on turning into that deep velvety green color. And this one, in case you didn't notice yet, also has the start of some pretty good defined ears going on it. And once again, I don't know, I'm also very into the deep sinus, huge lobed anthuriums. I don't know, you guys, it's just what I'm into right now. And you know, sometimes what you're into changes over time, but I think this is a gorgeous plant and I would love to own one someday. But let's move on to some more unique looking anthuriums, at least in my opinion. And we are moving on to a new section now. I believe this section is pronounced Balaoanum. Once again, I'll flash it up on screen for you. But a lot of the plants in this section to me are very what I'd call billowy plants. So the first one I want to take a look at is actually the Anthurium Brownii. And talk about ears, you guys. Look how giant the lobes are on this plant. I love the way this looks. I love the billowy texture to those leaves. This is not a velvety leaf. This is more of a glossy type leaf. A beautiful lighter green color compared to a lot of the plants that we've looked at so far, but it has that lovely ripply, billowy texture going on. I love how it comes down into a more narrow point, so it looks kind of like an elongated heart, but it is just an absolutely gorgeous plant. I think it is beautiful, and it reminds me a lot of another Anthurium that we have looked at before and is definitely going to be on my list because it is also super beautiful and billowy, and that is the Balaoanum. Hold on, you guys. Balaoanum is how I think it is pronounced. But once again, super billowy rippled leaves, that heart shape, very like defined heart shape to that leaf. Not quite as big of ears going on this one as on the other one, but it does still have those lobes, those defined lobes at the top. I think it is a stunning, stunning plant. Now, I'm not sure what section of the Anthurium genus this one is in. I had a hard time tracking it down. This plant has a bunch of other synonym names related to it as well, but I'm guessing just based on the characteristics of it that there's a pretty good chance that it's probably in the same section as that Brownii plant that we just looked at, but once again, don't quote me on that, okay? But up next, I actually want to take a look at what are known as some split leaf anthuriums, and these are super unique, especially this first one we're going to take a look at, and that is the Anthurium Clavigerum, I think is how it's pronounced. That may not be right, you guys. It's my best guess though. But when you look at this leaf, how awesome is this leaf? So this is also known as a giant split leaf Anthurium. These plants can get very, very large, but what I like about this is the individual like fingers on the leaves, if you will, have a very distinctly unique shape to them that almost reminds me kind of like an oak leaf, a type of oak leaf. Maybe I'm thinking of the wrong type of tree, but it's got that kind of like, makes me think of a tree leaf, a common tree leaf type shape. I don't know, you guys. If I can figure it out, I'll flash a picture up here of one of the leaves that I'm envisioning in my head from a tree. But I think this is gorgeous. I love how broad this leaf is. This beautiful kind of mid-green color on this plant. And these plants can get rather large, you guys. Even grown indoors, they can get up to 6 feet tall by 6 feet wide. So there's a reason they're called giant split leaf Anthurium. And these are in a section known as Dactylophyllum, I believe is how it's pronounced, within the Anthurium genus. Now the next split leaf Anthurium I want to look at is actually in a different section as well. And let me look at my notes so I can see. This one was giving me problems when I was trying to pronounce it earlier. It is, I think, Schizoplacium is how it is pronounced. That is the section within the Anthurium genus that this one lives. But this is what is known as an Anthurium Pedatoradiatum, I think is how it's pronounced. Also sometimes referred to as an Anthurium fingers, and it's pretty easy to see why. This is a gorgeous split leaf plant, and I have to be honest with you guys, plants like this, sometimes I'm not really attracted to them, and the Philodendron tortum comes to mind. I'm not a huge fan of that plant for the most part, but then every now and again I see a giant one, and I just think they're gorgeous when they're large. They are just so sculptural. They make excellent statement pieces in like homes or office buildings or wherever you can fit a large one. And I think I just need to like get over the fact that I don't like when they are small how they look, because I love how plants like this look when they're really large just because they are so sculptural. But these deep splits in these leaves are beautiful. We get that nice long section of leaf, and then it creates kind of a circular pattern. It almost reminds me a little bit of what spiral ginger looks like when it grows out, because it kind of grows into a circle and its leaves kind of splay out like this does. But this is a beautiful, beautiful plant. And fun fact, you guys, this is actually a truly terrestrial Anthurium. So most of the other Anthuriums that we are covering on this list today, actually I'm pretty sure all of the other ones we're covering on this list today, are actually epiphytic. So they either grow up the sides of plants or they grow on rocky surfaces or something like that. This plant actually grows solely in the ground. I believe it is native to Mexico. So just know that if you were to acquire one of these, the care requirements for this is going to be slightly different than your other standard Anthuriums that we've been looking at today. But our next Anthurium that I want to take a look at is actually a hybrid between this one and an Anthurium Clarinervium. So here's what the Clarinervium looks like. I want to show that to you because we are going to be seeing a couple of plants in a row here that are all hybrids that include this plant. But the next one we're looking at is a combination of this plant and this plant. And that is what is known as an Anthurium Macrolobium, also sometimes referred to as an Anthurium batwing. And the reason it's referred to as a batwing is because as this plant matures, you can see here each side of that leaf, the way that the points come off of that leaf kind of look a little bit like bat wings. But I think this is a very unique looking plant. I love the green coloring on this. I love that it has that long section coming down the middle and then those super big lobes at the top. Once again, I'm like digging on the big eared plants right now, but just a very, very unique plant. Super long, tall petioles. Once again, just very, very sculptural and beautiful. Now, you might be wondering, is this plant more terrestrial or more epiphytic? It is a combination of an epiphytic Anthurium and a terrestrial Anthurium. I am just gonna guess that it is probably slightly more terrestrial just based on the look of it. I feel like it's gotten more of its characteristics from the plant that we just looked at versus that Clarinervium. I think Toby might be coming to say hi, you guys. Hi, buddy. You wanna say hi? Or you just wanna walk your tail across the screen? You're not sure? All right, you guys, we're just gonna let him hang out, but he might walk through. You guys know how it goes. And if you're new here, welcome. Every now and again, you will see my cat's tail just kind of go doo-doo-doo in front of the screen. We just let him do what he wants to do. But back to our Anthurium. So, interestingly enough, you guys, when it comes to hybridizing plants just in general, but especially the Anthuriums that we're looking at today, sometimes the same plants, when you hybridize the same two plants, cross the same two plants, you don't always get the same exact result. Such is the case with our next plant. And this plant I'm about to show you is actually also a cross of the same two plants as the one we just looked at. So same parents, but look how different the outcome was when they were hybridized for this plant, which is known as Anthurium delta force. This is massively different looking than the one we just looked at. And what I think is happening here, This plant to me looks like it actually got more of its characteristics from the Clarinervium than it did from the other plants. So kind of the opposite of what we just looked at with the previous plant, but still a gorgeous plant. Obviously though, it looks more velvet leafed. It has this amazing like chevron triangular shape, which I believe is why it is referred to as delta force, delta being a triangle, right? Don't quote me on that. But I absolutely love how we got like kind of this rippled texture going on around the edge of this leaf as well. It does have a little bit of the lobing, more defined lobing starting at the top, but it doesn't, the sinus, like, by the way, you guys, I don't know if I've ever said this, but the sinus on a leaf is where it indents in, right? So if you have lobes, in between the lobes is what is known as the sinus on a plant leaf, just so you know. But I also like that there is some more defined veining on this plant as well. And I have seen other pictures where it looks a little bit more defined. Hopefully I have one I'm flashing up here for you now, but just a beautiful, beautiful plant. And once again, same parents as the plant we just looked at, but completely different. And like, I think this one, I would probably say is probably more epiphytic-like if you're caring for it than terrestrial, because it looks like it got more of its characteristics from the Clarinervium. But continuing on with plants that are related to the Clarinervium, this next one is what is known as the king of Clarinervium, and looks pretty obvious to me why it's known as a king, because it is just a gorgeous, like overemphasized version of the Clarinervium is how I feel about it. I mean, look at that veining. Like, it is so pronounced. It is so light. It is so bright. There's so much of it going on, but you've still got that very defined heart-shaped leaf. I do feel like it is a little bit longer and comes down more to a point than the regular Clarinervium, but it is beautiful. I mean, it is stunning. I have it up on my phone right now, you guys, and I keep just wanting to stare at it while I'm talking to you about it. Like, it is so beautiful. It reminds me a little bit of my silver blush, honestly, which we are going to still take a look at here in a bit. I have not forgot about that, but it's just got so much more veining on it, so much more contrast, but still that beautiful deep green coloring. And I just think it's gorgeous. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. But for our next two plants, I want to take a look at two that are even more different than the ones that we've looked at so far today. And the first one I want to take a look at is actually the Anthurium Luxurians. And honestly, you guys, this plant reminds me a lot of the Anthurium radicans, which I had pointed out to you guys in our previous two videos at two different nurseries in this area. They are starting to carry those. This has a very similar look to it with that kind of leathery and highly textured looking leaf. It is a very kind of different shaped leaf as well. It's not like heart shaped. Like all the leaves we've kind of looked at so far today for the most part have had a kind of a heart shape to them. Whereas this one, I guess it's still heart shaped. I don't know what I'm trying to say, you guys. It just has a slightly, maybe it's because it's a slightly smaller leaf, but don't be fooled, you guys. It doesn't stay small. It doesn't stay small. I don't know if I can find a Luxurians picture with a person in it for reference, but I definitely know I can find a Radicans one to give you an idea of how big these plants can get. But also, if I am flashing up a Radicans one right now, which I hope I am, hopefully you can see what I mean about how it looks very similar. However, the Luxurians here has darker leaves. It has much darker leaves to it. They do, once again, still have that kind of leathery look and that defined texture, but then the new leaves on the Luxurians also come in a reddish color. I absolutely have a thing for that in case you guys haven't noticed throughout the course of this video, but then they harden off to that deeper, beautiful green coloring. Now, interestingly enough, I would have thought that this plant would have been classified in the same section as the Radicans. However, the Radicans is in a section all by itself. It is literally the only plant in that section. I have already forgotten what that section is called, so I will flash it up on screen for you. It starts with a C. And yeah, I was kind of shocked. And so then I was like, well, what section is the Luxurians in? Because it looks so similar to this Radicans. What could possibly be so different that it would have to be in a separate section? And honestly, you guys, I couldn't figure out what section it was in. I couldn't find anything definitively saying. So yeah, that's interesting. It's really interesting. But moving on to our next Anthurium, I also feel like this one is a little bit more different than a lot of the other ones we have looked at. I also couldn't figure out what section this one was in, you guys, but this is what is known as Bosworth Beauty. And as you can see, beautiful, like burgundy, glossy leaves. When these leaves come in, they then turn into kind of a more regular, kind of mid to dark green color. And once again, not a velvety leafed one, not a billowy leaf one, really. It doesn't have texture on it like the Luxurians. It is just a very smooth leaf with no super contrasted veining or anything like that. Just a very kind of different look to it, but I absolutely love it. I think it is beautiful. Definitely a little bit more of a triangular shape, I feel like, to the leaves than heart-shaped, although there is still kind of that start of a heart shape there at the top. But a stunning, stunning Anthurium. And on that note, let me go grab my silver blush, since this is the one and only Anthurium I currently own. It was on my last year's wish list. It actually replaced the Clarinervium, or was it the Crystallinum? I think it was the Clarinervium that I had on my wish list last year. When I found out about the silver blush, I took the Clarinervium off and I put the silver blush on. So let me go grab it real quick. It has been rehabbing from being imported in my IKEA cabinet, so I didn't want to bring it out of its high humidity, especially considering we are iced in and the humidity in this house is horrible right now, until I absolutely had to. Okay guys, so real quick, just in case any of you aren't following me on Instagram or Facebook, and if you aren't and you would like to, it is at Aloha Plant Life. But I did post last week, I believe it was, maybe it was earlier this week. I don't know, you guys, this whole being iced in for 3 days thing has like thrown me off completely. But I did post that the Anthurium Silver Blush that I'm about to show you, after I got it in and I started rehabbing it, I'd had potted it up, and if you'll recall, when we did unpack those imports, this plant actually had the most root rot going on out of any of the plants. Now, it wasn't so much that I had to remove like all the roots or anything, and I thought I got all the root rot off before I potted it up, but apparently I did not do a good enough job. And so a few days ago, or I guess it's probably been almost 5 days now, I noticed that the leaves weren't looking as turgid as I would want them to. And so I kind of knew something was up. So I took it out of its pot, and sure enough, almost all of the roots had rotted off, except for this one little one that you'll be able to see in there. So we are restarting in water until we get more roots, and I think we'll still be fine, you guys. But other than that, looking absolutely beautiful, as you can see, called a silver blush because of that very defined silver veining on these beautiful heart-shaped velvety leaves with this kind of not super dark, but mid-greenish coloring here. And I absolutely am in love with this plant. Like I said, this is why I went down the rabbit hole of researching all the other types of Anthuriums out there and kind of building, I guess, sort of like a Anthurium only wish list, if you will. Well, I hope you guys have enjoyed looking at all of these Anthuriums with me today. I'm interested to know which ones were your favorite, so comment down below and let me know. And I do want to remind you guys that the next video you are going to be getting after this, that will be coming out this Wednesday. This Wednesday is officially the 1-year anniversary. I'm getting goosebumps and I'm getting emotional. I didn't think that was gonna happen. Okay. See, I'm blaming this on being iced in for 3 days as well. I'm just in my head, right? Anyways, this Wednesday, February the 8th, will officially be the 1-year anniversary of me launching this YouTube channel. Now, I counted launching as being the first day I actually uploaded a video, and I believe I uploaded like 4 videos that day that I'd been sitting on for a while because I was just nervous, and finally I was like, you just have to do it. And so it's been an interesting year, you guys, and we are going to talk all about it in our video this Wednesday. This Wednesday's video is going to be a repot and chat video because I've got some plants that need to be repotted badly, and I did ask you guys previously to submit your questions for that video, so I am going to be answering all of your questions, as well as kind of talking about how my experience over this first year of doing YouTube has been. So definitely hope you guys will tune in for that. If you do not have your little notification bell turned on, I highly recommend you do that so that you'll get notified when that video is released. And I promise that I will try not to get super, super emotional. But once again, you guys, thanks for joining me today in looking at these beautiful plants to help cheer me up during this gloomy weather that's been going on. I hope you have enjoyed this video. If so, please be sure to click that like and/or subscribe button down below. And I look forward to seeing you again next time. Aloha!